comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Hello, Fortitude audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. In our studio, I have Amos, our co-host.
Hi.
And over here to my left, we have Nancy Zollner. And Nancy, thank you so much. We connected through social media. This is officially the first time face-to-face that you and I have met.
So awesome to be here. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thanks for driving over to come and see us
You
today.
two hugged like you'd been hadn't seen each other in the longest forever.
That's a Holy Spirit hug.
Sisters in Christ.
Yes,
right?
It's the embrace of, our souls meet. Yes. It's fun.
Yeah. I like watching it. I don't do it with my guy friends though.
You don't go in to feel like the warmth.
It's different.
It is a little different. I have seen a few dudes like hug it out big time, but
there is a guy. We do have a friend who goes in for a big one, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is like being hugged by Christ.
Yeah.
I know that's not him, but he embodies it, and that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so y'all missed that. We hugged a while. The Heather hug, for those who know me, it was a Heather hug for sure. It's good to know there's more people out there that do that. So Nancy, your story is you've been to a lot of places, you've lived in several places, and now you are doing full-time ministry over in Minnesota.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful ministry. And so to share a little bit of who you are today, and then we're going to backtrack to how in the heck did you start this ministry, like where the passion drives from, okay?
Yep.
So share with our audience who Nancy is.
So I am a North Dakota farm girl. Grew up in a little tiny town just on the north of the South Dakota border.
Okay.
And grew up there loving working with my dad with the cattle, and my mom always had a desire to have horses. So she's the reason why they ever came on the place in the first place.
Okay.
And just loved doing all that stuff. And then tragedy hit and my parents got divorced.
Ooh, how old were you?
We always talk about this because it seems so blurry. I think I was about 11.
You were about 11?
Yeah.
Did you have other siblings? Or do you have other
I'm
siblings?
the oldest.
Okay.
And so my little brother was, so there was me and my two sisters and my little brother. Okay. And then we kind of did a lot of moving and shuffling around and ended up in the Black. That's when I ended up in the Black Hills. And yeah.
Did you have horses in the Black Hills?
I didn't.
Okay.
That's part of the reason why the divorce was so hard, because I left the farm, which was my heart.
Yeah. Yep. But you have the farm back in your heart, physically,
Yes.
mentally, yes, all of it. So let's go there for a second. And not speaking directly to parents, but being a child of a divorced family. I also have been divorced, and our son Jacob is a child of divorce. And we work really, really hard to make sure that we stay united and keep things very civil. And so I guess if you can go back to that 11-year-old sweet girl, like what are some things that you did or some things that helped you through those moments of despair at that age?
I actually lived in the despair for quite a while.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why I really went down a lot of wrong paths.
Okay.
I was angry at there was a lot of anger going back and forth. My parents made some really tough decisions, and I know they were doing the best that they could with the resources that they had. But I made a lot of tough decisions. We, as siblings, haven't lived together since I was not much older than 11. I think it was probably 13. We started dividing, and some lived with mom and some lived with dad. And then we did flip-flopping. And I moved out on my own at 16.
Wow.
Because I was really searching, and I was really stubborn and hard-nosed. And, but I wrote a letter to the school board as a sophomore in high school, and I just wanted to get out of school. I hated school. So I took my junior and senior year together per the school board of okaying my application. And I did it. And then lo and behold, I was also having a baby. So I did the, trying to get out of high school early prior to, I didn't even know I was going to be having a baby. So I was living on my own, and I did not take the easy road because it was not easy to go to school full time, and I was working as much as I could to pay the bills. And then I had a baby a week before I graduated high school.
Wow, Nancy.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Glory to God, because when I look back, there's no physical way I could have done that on my own.
Very
but
supernatural.
Yeah, totally.
Wow. So your beautiful daughter, did you say?
That was my son. Yeah, I have two boys. Yep.
Okay, two boys. And what was just the two of you got to, hard, but you got to have this son, and did that drastically change your trajectory of life?
He is such a blessing. And his dad and I ended up getting married several years later. Okay. We have two boys together. But that marriage did not last. We were together for a lot of years, though, over 22 years as high school kids that were trying to figure out life.
You stayed together.
Yes, we did.
Worked
yep.
Together for, I should say, worked through everything together for 22 years.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then you relocated.
I did.
Okay. So let's talk about, and that is where you're at now?
6 years in 18, I moved to
in 2018
to Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay. And you were blessed to meet another.
My husband, who is my soulmate, my 100% opposite. He is.
Yeah.
I am the out there, super energy, and he's just quiet, reserved, very structured, and we do this, and this, and I'm like, okay, let's try this, and this.
I like your husband. I like him already.
He's amazing. Yes.
That sounds a little bit like our relationship for sure. So does he have also ranching in the No. So let's get to Redemption Ranch, Nancy. Yes. Share your heart about. You talked about already having horses.
Yes.
When your mom invited that into your life, and that obviously stuck. There was something that God was planting in your heart early on in your life that now you're doing some really big things with it. So just dig into your passion and why you're doing what you're doing today. So
I'll start out with since I've started the ranch, when I was going back through pictures to put together just presentations and stuff of how Redemption Ranch started. And I found pictures of that 7, 8, 9-year-old little girl.
Okay.
I was doing the exact same thing at that age that I am now. And it was I just wept when I first saw that, because it was wow. Mm-hmm. God was planting all those little seeds even when I was just a little whippersnapper. So anyway, when I read a book by Kim Meter, and it's been about 20 years ago now. I have a very dear friend of mine sent me a book from her. It's called Hope. There's two books. I think it's Hope Rising. One's called Hope Rising, and it's called A Bridge Called Hope. And I can't remember which one I read.
Hope Rising's really good.
Okay, you've read them?
Mm-hmm. Just that one.
So amazing. So my mentor type person in my life, who was an adult, helped me a lot through my parents' divorce, because she was back at home. And she sent me the book. And I still have the little piece of paper that she wrote on. She just said, I think... I heard about this, story. I don't have time to read the book. Maybe you will. And I'm so back then, 20 years ago, I was not a reader. I didn't have time. I was raising kids. I was working 2 jobs. But
can I pause there for a second? This mentor, did you seek that person out, or did that person see that you maybe needed just someone to come alongside you?
Oh, she's just a rock. She sought me out. Yeah.
Oh,
great family friend of my parents. Enough.
We speak about that quite a bit, that these young, just people trying to figure out life that maybe didn't have the direction or the upbringing. And so if you have been blessed and you have the wisdom, or you have the scars to prove some things you've walked through, just to be available, to really go out of your way, take the inconvenience, and just give someone a book. Like she spoke into your life, but she gave you a book that you're now referencing how many years later. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, keep
going.
going.
So she gave me the book and I just, stashed it with all the other things I didn't have time to do. And one day, I don't know if it was blizzarding or what, but the book had a horse on the front of it. So that's what it had going for it. And in the book, it's all stories of how they took rescued horses that came from horrible, like deathly situations and paired them with kids who were in great trauma. And I couldn't put it down. I just wept and wept. And I was like, this is what I got to do with my life. And I was in no place, any way, shape, or form to do any such thing. But and I still see in my mind's eye that that little seed of hope, that little light was planted there. Growing up we went to church and I grew up knowing about Jesus, but I didn't have that fueled fire relationship with him. And so when I read the story about how God was I was like, it's all God. We can, as people, do all the stuff, but unless it's God and his spirit that's doing the
transformation,
work,
yep,
it's just striving. And so that was, like I said, 20 years ago. And then as I went through the valleys with my ex-husband and all this stuff, I knew that was the goal. That was the goal that I needed to keep working towards, because that seed was there and it's like fan into flame.
Yeah.
And so when that chapter ended and I basically was at another very low point. I mean, I'm living in an apartment. I've walked away from my horses at this point in time because I had them. So God got me to another point where the only thing I really had was him. And I just got on my knees and I'm like, what do you, I was teaching and I loved that and I had kids, but that purpose was just so void. And so as I just kept seeking and I was, in a relationship with God and I had women surrounding me that were helping me find that path, I went out to Bend, Oregon in 2016 or 16. They do a once-a-year training to help you learn how they started Crystal Peaks. So that book, that the ranch that was in the book, I went out there and did their similar ministry training. And on the last day, Kim tells you 3 things. We can tell you how to start Crystal Peaks, but that's not what God's called you to do. You go home and you pray, you listen and you do. You pray and you ask God, what is he telling you to do? Listen to what he says and do what he tells you to do. And I'm like, that's what I did. I got home and the Bible that I was in at that time is just, I love picking it up because it's like reliving those memories, the verses that I just couldn't highlight enough times, and so Redemption Ranch is built on Isaiah 58. It's such a beautiful, I remember reading that for the first time and I'm very emotional. The tears were just running down my face because 3 of the words that are in Isaiah 58 are rebuild, repair, and restore. And I have had so many different types of trauma in my life, and God has rebuilt, repaired, and restored each and every one of them in some way, shape, or form. And redemption was the foundation, because redeem is actually not in Isaiah 58. But the first part of it is you will be a wellspring, springing forth. And I could just see this. That's what, we're supposed to be like little sparklers, right? I see the light and I see the sparklers and it's all redemption. It's not us. There's nothing we can do. We're on our own. And it's unless God redeems the story, and he redeems everything that we bring him, he will redeem. He pulled me up out of the ashes so many times.
Yeah. Nancy, how do you hear God? When you said, go home, pray, listen, and then do, how do you perceive what God's telling you to do?
That is so awesome, because when at first, it was questioning and double, is that really God? Is that really what he said? No, maybe he didn't, So he was so gracious in my questioning that he would give me like, yep, that's what you said. So like in praying, when I get home, I literally just opened my Bible and I was like, what is this going to look like? Because I was just like searching for answers and I was ready to go and I was ready to get it all started, but the timing wasn't right. Like I had some things to learn yet before that ever was to get started. So when I hear from God, it's just, I have to be quiet. I usually have some time of praise and worship and just listening. And then, when I read Isaiah 58, it was just the Holy Spirit in you. It was just like, there's your word, there's your word, there's your word. And then.
And that which took action. You had to take action, you had to do the work. And then something caught your attention, something extraordinary, something supernatural.
Yeah.
That just spoke to you.
It did. Yeah. And then I write it all down and then I prayed over it. And it was a process of quite some time just getting those words and like, this is really what I believe God has called me to focus on.
Yeah. How long, what's the time frame we're talking about? Months, years?
For those words? No, because I came home and I was like, I was on fire, we got to get this going. And I'm in an apartment with my horses at my sister's house, this isn't, but it was just like in those little moments though, God brought me this super sweet little young woman, who was just walking through some tough stuff and she just wanted to hang out with horses. So I took her over to my sister's house, so it was just like little by little, he just kept opening the door of like, this is what it's going to look like. Just keep walking the path. I got some stuff to prepare you for. And I had no idea what was ahead, that was one thing that God has so taught me because I always wanted to know, what does the end of the staircase look like? And it was like, all he was doing was telling me to take the next step. And that's really how everything has came about. It's like, I'm not telling you what it's going to look like. And my husband, that's one thing that makes me so frustrated because God gives him the vision. He saw how the farm was going to be set up. Cause I think a while ago you asked me about him. There has been nothing living on our place since 1975. Other than corn and beans. It was corn and bean ground. When I met him online, I'm like, just so you know, I don't know what God's calling me to do, but I know I'm called to ministry. And if you're not aboard with horses, then don't waste my time or yours. This is the direction I'm going.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
We're kind of in a similar season in our life too. We're like, all right, what's next? And maybe we hear nothing or we hear something that we don't expect. So it's helpful to hear that things don't happen overnight. It's not as like necessarily a voice in your head. For me personally, when I sit in the wait, I can never hear anything. Maybe it's because my voice is
you
too
just
my
hear
head's
yourself.
Too
I
loud.
got to do this. I got to do that.
And like you said, it's just little things here and there, like throughout my day, not when I'm trying to be intentional. It's like on his time,
Yes.
And so I like unpacking. It's different for everyone, isn't it? And when you don't hear something, you can get really frustrated. And when it doesn't happen fast enough, you can get really frustrated. So you're saying just stay the course, be patient. God's got a plan. He may work through your spouse. You'll get there. This is not like there's no small print here, honey. For people who are going through this, really.
Truly. Yeah.
Just
And if I've heard it said, if he's making you wait, it's because he's making you ready. And I'm like, that couldn't be more true. And there was so many times when I wanted this or this thing to happen. And so, in my ridiculous thinking, I try to manufacture a way for it to work, and it's like, I have so many obstacles. And then when it's supposed to happen, it's just like, it just happens. And it's like,
works.
Okay, this is why, this didn't happen when I wanted it to, because I had 3 lessons to learn prior to that.
Yeah. Risk versus trust. I just posted something about this before I got here today, which is really fun that it lines up with our story today. Because I left the workforce over a year and a half ago now. And the risk earthly way of thinking of it was, this is ridiculous. What are you asking me to do? Oh, heck no. Financially, that is irresponsible. Secondly, I really like what I do. And then you go through all this justification. And the trust way of doing it versus thinking of it as a risk, you trust and you say, well, that sounds awful and completely doesn't make any sense to me. But Lord, like, I trust you. I know this is going to be great. It's going to suck through the process, but I will walk through this with you, and I will do whatever I have to do to live out your will. So like, hands and feet, let's go. And then you just trust and you run or you sit, right? And that's what you've been doing for all this time. How did you work through a lot of your own trauma? What did you seek out after going through what you went through? And then you make choices, you're like, oh, then you're shoveled with shame and the judgments and all the stuff that comes at you. How did you get past all that, Nancy, and just go, I don't care?
Oh boy, that's a deep one. There's just so many things. I started with just reading, and that's kind of when I fell in love with reading.
Okay.
I read brain science books and stuff that I would have never in my life that I would have been reading, but it's so cool so I started educating myself about how the brain works. How do relationships work? Like different things that I didn't, like I maybe knew, but I didn't know from my heart to my head, like, wow, this is what happened in this relationship, and I started to see dysfunction as it really was. And forgiveness, oh my goodness, forgiveness was huge. Like letting things that were eating me, I laid them at Jesus's feet, and I really had to forgive those people.
Any books, any top of mind books for our listeners?
Boundaries.
Amen. Yeah, there you go. That's a great one.
Okay, audience, I will be completely frank. Nancy and I have never spoke except through some email exchange, and never has any of this been talked about. This is what the brain stuff, the boundaries, I just didn't know. I didn't understand. I didn't know.
Yeah. And
you're speaking what we literally are putting our whole ministry into, is teaching this stuff.
Boundaries. Yeah. Anything else?
That's by Henry Cloud and John Townsend.
Yes.
Yep.
And so when I read that book, I had none. I had no healthy boundaries. I didn't know I had the ability to draw them and be able to say with confidence, like, I love you, but this is how I need to love you and operate healthy for me. Like I had to get healthy with my own self. And I didn't think that was a real thing. Like, because I thought I had it all together. Yeah. I was so far from it. Like I had to get healthy for myself. So I think, it started with boundaries. I read some relationship books that helped me understand the dysfunction in the marriage and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then forgive, I love my kids. It was so hard to go through a divorce. Like that's hard. Yeah. There's a reason why we're meant to be, and I that needed to happen. And I love my two kids. But it's hard. They went through a lot of stuff too because of that. So I ended up actually going through a program called the Journey Program, which I don't know if it's going to exist anymore. The little lady who did it passed away this year.
Oh.
She was in her 90s. Little sister Emily at the monastery in Watertown, South Dakota.
Okay.
Opened her, it was at the monastery. So obviously that's Catholic in the way that, but she was the most open, amazing, another mentor, right?
Yeah.
At a time in my life when I sure needed it. And she loved me like Jesus. She was the hands and feet of Jesus. And that program was a year long. I met with her every week. So that the whole timing thing, like where I was in the depths of where I was, but I was so hungry to know God And here this little lady had lived at her, the majority of her life, this relationship. And she just poured into me and she loved me. And what we actually did in the journey program is I went back to birth. You literally go back to realizing your conception and all the things. And she walked me through this. It was kind of like forgiveness. You go back through all the things that have ever happened in your whole life and forgiving and ask, in some of the different traumas. I know this might sound weird, but it doesn't sound, it's not weird to me anymore. But like in some of the deepest hurts, because I had a lot of nightmares and a lot of really hard stuff that I had to process. Yep. And then in that, I would ask Jesus where he was in that situation. And because even in the midst of it, he was there with me. He never left me or any of the other people that were, part of my story. So that journey program that year with little sister Emily, I can't wait to see her crown in heaven.
Oh, that's wonderful.
She has been a saint to so many people. She changed a lot of lives. And I know somebody actually got a lot of her material to try to figure out how to write. She had dream workshops. She had Enneagram workshops. She just had so much. So again, I was just like soaking in all this knowledge about who I was and really figuring out who Nancy was, which, prior to that, I was a mom, a teacher, and all the things, but it's like, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Who are you?
And you're on version like Nancy 0.100, right?
Yeah.
That's what I always say with me too. I'm not the same person I was last year even. Yeah. And it gets exciting because you're like, ooh, who am I becoming?
Right.
Yeah. So okay. I'm excited to go back and look at that journey program. I do some work with the sisters.
Oh.
It's been wonderful to get to meet some of the ladies that are their faith is so deep. The hunger, the learned spirit, the hunger that you had for the knowledge, because I think once you start learning more and it starts making more sense, it becomes like, I can't listen to enough podcasts. And
I know.
Yeah, you're a podcast junkie.
He's had
in a good way.
Yeah,
I love
in
it.
a good way. Yeah, because I'm like, then I can regurgitate and feed it into people that don't know. Because before it was, like you said, we just walked around going, well, I'm just doing the best that I know. But there's so much more to know to make those decisions better and easier for the outcome. I feel like when you have the knowledge.
Yeah, so true.
Like when you talk about your husband, Amos is the same, where it's like he came into my life and even through the depths, he never gave up. And he was always so inspiring about the dreams and the visions that I've had, even for this podcast. Well, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Like, you got corn and beans on your farm, Nancy, and your husband's like, I see it. Okay, we can do this.
Yep.
So it's that just believing that it's possible. If God has put this on your heart to do, then let's do it, right? Like, and when you do, it's not a lot of work. It's fun, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a lot of physical labor and things, but getting up and doing what God has called you to do is just a blast.
It is
so
awesome.
Share, like, what are you doing at your ranch?
So after I'm sitting in that apartment, and then shortly after I went and did training, and then in 2018, my husband and I got married. So I moved from South Dakota to Minnesota, which is where I'm at. That's where the ranch is over by Wabasso.
Okay.
We started, I actually left my horses back home in South Dakota with my son. I had two. And then we planted grass. So I had a place to put them.
Yep.
That was year one. So that would have been 19.
2018, yeah.
And then the second year, I was pregnant. So we put in all the fencing that summer so that the horses could come back. And then in 19, we got the paperwork, like the 501c3 and all the stuff going. And then COVID hit, so I remember, the paperwork was a ton of work too. Like, and I did I didn't have anybody to help me, like regurgitate all the paperwork.
Yeah.
Like I don't like reading legal stuff, but
No.
I got it done. And then I'm like, oh, right, we're ready to go. We're ready to have these camps and ready to, like all the things. And then COVID hit. And I'm like, I remember like shaking my fist at God, like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
You and a lot of other people.
Oh my goodness. But
Because you were ready to start rolling out camps.
Yeah, I was ready to like hit the ground running, but I didn't really know what I was going to hit the ground running doing.
Yeah.
So God really had it all under control. So I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Because I have it on paper that we are a ranch and we are going to get going, and this is not stopping me. And so I was like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Because we can't do nothing. That's not an option.
Yeah.
And so I started calling, going through the COVID rules because we were all under different rules and things. And one of the rules was like small groups. You could do stuff outside. And I'm like, okay, check. What can I do? What can I do? And we could, so I reached out to some local churches because Vacation Bible School was pretty much canceled all over the country. And so my first camp was kind of like replacing what Vacation Bible Schools were because we could, I don't remember all the exact rules, but it was like small groups outside, 6 foot apart, whatever. That's how we started. And which is exactly what our local churches had, were small groups, families, because they were of like households or whatever the rules were. And so it was what I needed at the time because it helped me process through what are my camps going to look at. And the other thing with moving from South Dakota to Minnesota, again, God took me from like thinking I had it all together, and I left everything in a sense because my family was in South Dakota, my church was in South Dakota, like all the stuff that made sense.
Yep. And
here I am in Minnesota with my husband and my son, and I had no church home. It was trying to, so he was like, here you go.
Yeah.
I'm what you got.
You're creating the church. You're bringing, you kind of in an essence brought, like by you reaching out and not just staying idle, you're like, okay, well, I got this. Now let's adjust to what's going on versus being discouraged and just thrown in the towel.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I'm going to make it work, which is what you did.
Yeah.
So all through COVID or through like that first year, that's what you were doing?
Yep. We did small, and it's our real mission is shedding the love and light of Jesus in an equine mentored experience. And so as that morphed, as we were trying to figure out how to make it work best and how God really wanted us to have it flow, the last 2 years is really where we feel we're going to keep navigating. It's one child, one mentor, one horse. So like we've talked about with the mentors, it's so vital, big brothers, big sisters with horses, but our number one focus is Jesus. We're pointing them to Jesus. So we start our camps with a devotion time. And we write our curriculum every year. This last year was the world's perspective versus God's perspective. And it was just beautiful how that worked out. And then we do a little chore together, 5 to 10 minutes as our whole group. And it's just fun to talk about responsibilities and how we build and work together. And then they spend the rest of the time with their horse and their mentor, which is for some kids, just brushing and grooming. And for some kids, they're ready to ride. So we kind of start our summers off every year just with the basics of safety and horsemanship and that kind of stuff. But the real growth that happens is between a mentor and a kid and how God uses that horse to teach them things. So
how many horses do you have?
I have 7.
You have 7?
Okay. Or I should say I had 7. We are down to 5 right now. We lost 2 over the summer, and we're trying to figure out how that's going to work.
Okay. So do you find your horses? Do you purchase them through the nonprofit?
We have one that has been donated to us.
That's what I was just going to ask. If there's any listeners out there who have horses that maybe they're downsizing or want to move off the farm, you would consider taking the horse if someone wanted to donate it.
Yep.
Okay, that's good to know. And then with your camps, they're day camps.
Yep.
So locally for the geographical area, it would be someone that you'd have to be able to travel into your location. Which
they come once a week throughout the summer.
Once a week. Oh, that's not bad. Okay. All right. And so at any given time, how many kids do you take at a time?
So because we do them, they're 90-minute camps. So I need to have one kid for every horse. And our space size, we're pretty much maxed out at 5 kids at a time.
Okay.
So throughout the summer, we're running about 160-ish mentored sessions. And now my husband and I just finished, we got our indoor riding arena finished, and it's been up now it'll be 2 years in February.
Okay.
So we're also working with local foster families and kids from referral situations. So if it falls outside of our summer camp sessions, we want to be able to utilize the mentorship part of it to help kids who are in the middle of tough stuff, because there's lots of tough stuff that happens all year. And we're just opening. There's another connection that's very possibly coming in 2025 that we're making. It's exciting. I'm hoping we're going to be able to start working with another local youth group of kids who are navigating some tough stuff.
I have to give a quick shout out. There's some local. We live close to a place called Rock Ranch that is owned by dear friends of ours. And then also another, Jenny Edgars, if you're familiar with her, she started a camp in Sioux Falls with horses, and it's an overnight stay out at the Sioux Falls Fairgrounds. And again, a dream she had that God just cultivated and moved forward super fast. And there are kids from all over that go to this, and it's all based off of Jesus and biblical truth too. So
what are the results you're seeing before and after for kids who come in and then go through the program? What's the impact that you see?
It's every kid is different, we have, and so many people ask us, like, do they have to check this box or this box in order to attend? And the one requirement for them coming is that it's safe for them mentally, physically, and emotionally, and that they want to come. Yeah. Other than that, if they're 7 to 17, they come. So we have some Christ followers, parents that are Christian homes that just want their kids to come because they're hungry to learn about Jesus. And so in that situation, it's just fun to see them learn, and we have a Bible for every kid. Some of them bring their own. During our devotion time, their mentors helping them look up Bible verses, and some of them, and then we have a scripture memory verse that we strive for them to memorize each week, just to keep them meditating on the Word. And we have other kids who are coming from really, really tough situations. Do you want me to share a story?
Yeah.
So I have so many. They're just awesome. So in one particular situation, this girl, middle school age girl, she just loved animals. I mean, if she could have stayed at the ranch 24/7, she would have. She couldn't get enough of them. But one of the things she really lacked was boundaries. And that is so evident. I mean, the horses help us see things sometimes that we either need to confront, or it's so much easier to pinpoint an issue like boundaries with a horse than it is to say, Nancy, I need you to work on this. So in this situation, they're just, we need to respect the horses, but they also need to respect us because they're a large animal. And so you have to, develop this, like when they're on the lead rope, you're in charge and you need to make sure you're a good leader. And so there was kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy going on with this kiddo that just didn't really have really great boundaries. And she was like, always just like, up in their face, and so the horses were like, whoa. Well, as I'm watching, because I wasn't mentoring this kid, but I monitor what's going on. And we also need to take into account what the horses are telling us. And it's like when the horses are going, whoa.
Yeah.
And it was like one of my horses that doesn't hardly ever get like, she's pretty low key. Like whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. And like, she was kind of like, whoa.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I was really frustrated. I'm like, God, how do I help this one? And, I'm like, over time, as I'm waiting on the Lord, he showed me, within like because they come every week. So I was like, there was something, and I knew there was something. And I'm like, what am I missing? What do I need to help? What do I need to see to help this one? And, I woke up one day and was like, pew, there was the word, right? And God just kind of showed me through the situation that this kid had been from, there's some other traumas behind it. Lots of people in her life had walked away or pushed her away. And what I sensed was, because of her like, in their face, it was the self-fulfilling prophecy of everything is pushing away from me. Everyone's going away from me. And so when you have a kid who is screaming for attention, literally, but everything is pushing away, and I'm like, okay, God, you need to create a situation so that she feels chosen. And so the story, I've told this story a few times. I called it the chosen one. So as God was showing me that this kid, over time after time, people have pushed her away, let her down, walked away from her. So this next situation, I just rely on the Holy Spirit, because there ain't nothing I can do to control a horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're working together, and I alerted the mentor. I just said, I want you to know that this is what I felt the Lord telling me about this particular child. And I know that God's got to figure out a way to show her that she's chosen. So she's, brushing her horse, and I'm like, but we also need to understand that the horses are, like when they're stepping away, we need to say, hey, let's create some healthy boundaries. Let's work on that piece. So the day that it happened, she's working with this little horse, and all they're talking about boundaries. I'm hearing the conversations, and again, she's kind of pushing him away with her. It was her demeanor, and then I'm like, God, this isn't working. And then she goes to leave, and the little pony turns his head all the way around and whinnies at her as she's walking across the arena. And tears are streaming down my face. And I'm like, I called out her name. And I said, you hear that? He wants you to come back. So in that moment, you have a kid who finally like it was audible. Other people see it. Other people heard it. And it was like, he chose you. And then it was, you know what? Who else is choosing you? Jesus, your Savior. He chooses you. Do you know that? He's never going to push you away, no matter what you do. So, we don't always know the entire depth of the story, but how God creates those little snippets to show him. And, it's horses. Yes, there's nothing magical or mystical about them, but
I think there is. I don't even know what it is, but there is something very beautiful about the way the interaction between humans
God
and horses.
Opened that door. And so the transformation from then on out, that the boundaries continued to be healthy.
It's almost like she was pushing herself on them, or like, because you don't want people to leave, because it's happened so often that it's like you overstep because the want is so big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's really beautiful that was story. A moment.
That's amazing. Yeah.
When it comes to horses, because when I just was explaining the depth of horses and why a lot of other friends of mine that I know have horse ranches and arenas, and they're doing therapy with horses. What do you think it is? Because horses are big and they've been around since, long time ago, roaming the hillsides. What is it? Do you know? Like, is there something?
So dogs and horses are the only two mammals that can sense the emotional aspect. That's why they're both used in therapy.
Okay.
And a horse can sense your heartbeat 6 to 8 feet away, which is incredible when you think about it.
Yeah.
And I've done some training. It's called faith-based equine assisted philosophy. There's other trainings called like in the therapy world, they call it EAL, but when you add Christ to it, it's just a different dimension.
Okay.
And when I learned that, it's like the healthy boundaries. You can take that lesson and teach it with horses, and it's being sensitive to the Holy Spirit, truly. But the horse so often, and the horses have taught me so much. Oh my goodness, like when I think I got it all together, God goes, yeah, right. I'll give you this horse. They're going to show you, that I'm like, oh, not today.
Oh,
so
man.
yeah, they sense, they have a sense about anxiety, like frustration, like all this stuff. You can't and the one thing about a horse is they are always present. I can flip out, like lose my temper or something. They forgive you.
Yeah.
They
come back.
They come back, where people don't, So there's just a whole different dimension of teaching and learning. And then God help me in this area.
Amazing. What's the website?
redemptionranchmn.org.
Okay. Redemption Ranch MN. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, of course.
Yeah, we will. Wow. This is so fun. I love learning about other opportunities in the area for those who may need, or not just who want to just even learn more about horses. To send them out to your place would be great.
Yeah.
Is there anything beyond a donation of a horse or a donation of like just to learn about you? If someone feels called to give, just to reach out to you and have a conversation.
Oh, for sure. So just, on a side note, for our camps, my prayer has always been to keep it free for all kids. So we don't, all of our camps are at a cost everybody can afford. They're free. And I just keep trusting God in that he's going to provide, and he continues to open doors. I've done some speaking events to just come around to churches and let them know what we're doing, or encouraging things.
Okay.
Great.
That's good to know.
That's great. So you have access to resources. You're a great place to multiply the resources.
Yes.
Generational change through your ranch. What a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for following the call that he led you to all these years, from when you were a child to the mentor to today. You're doing exactly what he's called you to do. And I love stories like that. So thank you for sharing yours today with us, Nancy.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Nancy.
God bless you.
Thank you so much for listening. We want to change lives through this podcast. And if you want to support this podcast or our guests, please see the links below for our Patreon and giving links.
And like and subscribe, and also share our podcast as much as possible. Thank you.